Hello and welcome. I'm Asima Katauka and you're watching the NewsX Eurozone. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. French President Emmanuel Macron and Chinese President Xi Jinping were seen together in Chengdu, China, in a gesture highlighting Beijing's focus on Paris as it seeks more economic engagement with the EU, as Macron ended his China visit on a lighter note with the agenda featuring a visit by his wife, First Lady Brigitte, to a research center for pandas. French President Emmanuel Macron takes on French Murdoch on battle against disinformation. French President Emmanuel Macron has come under fire from the political right for suggesting that news outlets be labeled to distinguish those that comply with journalistic ethics from those that do not. According to a transcript of a confidential call cited by German magazine, French President Emmanuel Macron and German Chancellor Friedrich Merz have voiced severe skepticism about efforts by the US government and its envoys to negotiate a peace deal between Ukraine and Russia. Germany's ruling coalition of German Chancellor Friedrich Merz faces a test of unity today when Germany votes on a bill expanding pensions for people to work past retirement, as Vice Chancellor Lars Klingbeil warns that government must rely on its own ranks to pass such bill. The EU has agreed to fully phase out Russian gas by September 2027 and ban LNG imports by the end of 2025, with plans to cut Russian oil next, while the move is hailed as a step towards European energy independence. Hungary and Slovakia are preparing legal challenges as Russia warns of higher costs and reduced competitiveness. Greek parliament approves purchases of rocket systems from Israel. The purchases of 36 pulse rocket artillery systems from Israel for about $757.84 million, as it seeks to keep up arms race with its historic rival and neighbor Turkey. Dutch Economic Affairs Minister has defended his surprise takeover of Nexperia, saying the move made without informing EU, China or US allies was necessary to protect strategic chip supplies. The seizure has sparked many criticizing his move as lawmakers question this drastic measure. A vast leak of Syrian intelligence files has triggered a wave of Belgian investigations, as Belgium is conducting 19 criminal investigations into suspected Syrian war criminals living in Belgium, as Syria marks a year after the collapse of Bashar al-Assad's regime. Now we start with Kremlin statements. The Kremlin has said that there are no plans for Putin-Trump phone call for now. Kremlin has also added that Moscow is waiting for a reaction from the United States after the meeting between Russian President Vladimir Putin and U.S. Special Envoys Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner. It has added that Russia is encouraged by talks with the United States and is ready to engage further. This comes as Putin has stated that there are some proposals in the U.S. plan to end the war that are unacceptable to the Kremlin. He has also said that the proposals discussed at the Kremlin meeting were based on earlier discussions between Russia and the United States. He has added that his 5-hour talks with Witkoff and Trump's advisor, as well as son-in-law Jared Kushner, were necessary and useful, but also difficult work. President Putin has remarked that the initial U.S. 28-point peace proposal was trimmed to 27 points and split into 4 packages. However, he has refused to elaborate on what Russia could accept or reject. Now for this discussion, we welcome Mr. Ben Aris. He's a Russian journalist, joins us live from Berlin. Thank you very much, Mr. Aris, for joining us again. Good to see you. Can you tell us what do we know so far about this 28 point that has been reduced to 27?
Well, it sounds like the American version of the plan. This whole story kicked off when it was leaked, the Americans, together with the Russians and some input from the Ukrainians, excuse me, had drawn up a 28-point plan. That follows with summit in Geneva where the Europeans got involved, and then the Europeans started cutting the plan up. So there was a 19-point version that was completely different to the original one. There was a European Parliament version also with lots of red lines for the Kremlin. And it seems that at the meeting in Moscow this week between Witkoff and Kushner, together with Putin, that the Americans have just ignored all of the European input and gone back to their original 28-point plan. One of the points has been dropped. After the meeting, both the Kremlin and the American side said they weren't going to release any details about what was discussed, although Pushakov, the aide to Putin, made it very clear that the question of territories is top of the list. But one of those points has been downgraded, and everyone's guessing as to which one it is.
And Mr. Ayres, how do you analyze current unity towards Ukraine among European countries?
There is none. If the Americans have presented their own plan and ignored the European recommendations, then there is a dramatic split now between the allies, between Europe and America. And moreover, you mentioned in your preamble that Spiegel, a German magazine, got hold of notes, a high-level EU meeting just a couple of days ago. And there Macron is talking about warning Zelensky that America is going to, quote unquote, betray him by giving away territory or agreeing to give away territory to Russia. And how that would work would be that the Americans could unilaterally recognize Russia's sovereignty over particularly the Donbass and the Crimea over the heads of the Ukrainians who have refused to contemplate giving up territory, over the heads of the Europeans who have been backing Zelensky on that particular point, and then put Zelensky into an awkward position where they present their version of the plan, approved by Putin, as a fait accompli, and told him, take it or leave it. If you leave it, then we just cut you off completely.
And particularly I wanted to ask about E4 countries. How do you see E4 countries supporting Ukraine further? And do you see that they are willing to they're willing to see war continuing or ending?
It's a difficult question. Clearly from the rhetoric that the EU is committed to continuing to support Ukraine, and it's also equally clear that America has now walked away. Trump has sent no money whatsoever this year since he took over, and America used to account for 40% of the funding. And that puts Ukraine into an extremely difficult position because they need at least $100 billion a year to keep going, half of that for military, half of that for government. And the EU has to take on the entire burden, and it hasn't got the money. Most of European economies are in crisis, in recession. France, they've got a massive budget crisis, and they're looking to seize the frozen Russian central bank assets, some 300 billion, in order to pay for Ukraine going forward. But then that effort is failing. And without the so-called reparation loan, then Europe just doesn't have the money. And so Ukraine's facing a huge crisis, economic crisis. It is in the beginning of next year where it's just going to run out of cash. And I don't know, that would force it into defeat, to capitulation, simply because they can't pay the soldiers' wages, they can't pay teachers' wages, and they can't afford to buy any more arms.
Yes. We'll come back to you, Mr. Ayres. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now, staying in the region, French President Emmanuel Macron has reaffirmed that unity between Europe and the United States remains critical in supporting the Ukraine. He has also stated that there is no sign of mistrust between the two sides. Macron made these remarks during his visit to China, where he has emphasized that Europe and the United States must continue working together to advance efforts towards peace in Ukraine. He has also indicated that European leaders support the peace initiatives currently being pursued by Washington in Moscow. These statements follow reports from a German publication which suggested that both the French president and the German chancellor have expressed concerns in private about U.S. negotiation efforts with Moscow. The report allegedly referred to a transcript from a confidential call. Now we welcome back Mr. Ben Aris. He's a Russian journalist, joins us live from Berlin. Thank you very much, Mr. Aris, for staying with us. As you mentioned earlier in our earlier discussion, that you don't see any unity among European coalition or European countries. Do you think? How long do you think Zelensky can hold his place or his office?
It's also a good question. I mean, one of the 28 points presented by the Americans was that there has to be elections within 100 days. Effectively, that means ousting Zelensky, changing the leadership for a post-war agreement. Zelensky's got a double trouble in so much as that in the last few weeks, a massive corruption scandal has broken in Ukraine that's doing him huge damage, where one of his business partners, a close friend, where he went to celebrate his birthday at Mindich's house, has walked off with $100 million in a kickback corruption scandal in the energy sector. And this has been hugely damaging. I mean, 2 ministers have also been implicated and fired. Yermak, the head of the presidential administration, probably the second most powerful person in the country, has also been implicated and fired. And the Ukrainians themselves are they're suffering under a hail of missiles and drones. And the elite, the leadership of the country is helping themselves to tens of millions of dollars in corrupt schemes to enrich themselves. And Mindich himself has fled the country and is now believed to be somewhere like Israel with the money. There's no arrest warrant for him, although he's been sanctioned by Zelensky. And all of this is coming together at a time where Zelensky might be forced into territorial concessions to Russia to end the war. And that would be political suicide on his part. But it doesn't seem he has much choice. So he's really backed into a corner. And there's a lot of speculation that he's not going to survive as the leader of the country for much longer.
Right, we will be eyeing that. With that, I would like to thank Mr. Ben Aris for joining us as a Russian journalist from Berlin. Thank you very much. Now we move on to our next news. China and France have issued joint statements on several global issues, including Ukraine and Palestine. Both sides have expressed support for all efforts aimed at achieving a ceasefire and restoring peace in accordance with international law. In addition to political cooperation, the two nations have signed multiple agreements, including protocols on sanitary requirements for the export of French alfalfa grass to China, as well as an MOU in the registration of infant formula milk powders. Furthermore, both countries have released a joint statement on nuclear energy cooperation and agricultural collaboration, underscoring their continued commitment to strengthening bilateral ties. Now for this discussion, we welcome retired Major General Gigi Dwivedi. He's an international relations and defense expert, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Major General, for joining us again. Good to see you. Major General, how do you analyze what's come out of Macron and Xi's bilaterals, including the call for unity and the call for support for Palestine?
Well, Asuma, firstly, always a pleasure to be on the NewsX World. Well, this visit of President Macron comes at a very crucial time because the Ukraine war is actually in a very, I would say, difficult state because on one side, the talks are on to bring the war to an end, and there's the President Trump's initiative. On the other side, Europe and France are not on the same page with America. At the same time, the Europeans and French feel that the Chinese are instrumental in lending very valuable support to President Putin to carry the war on. So therefore, when you look at this whole complex or the whole situation, this visit actually has high degree of significance. Now, first and foremost, the French and the Chinese relations. Well, this is Macron's fourth visit to China after he became the president. And this is also the 60th year of cycle between the French and the Chinese relationship. Now, point is that I think a couple of issues are on the agenda. First and foremost, President Macron feels, or at least will try, that to convince President Xi, because Xi has very good relation with President Putin. Rather, China and Russian relations today are no limit friendship. So possibly President Macron feels that they can pressurize China, and in turn, China can pressurize uh, Putin to at least end the war, or at least negotiate to end the war. That is point number one. The second issue is there are a lot of differences, as I said, between France, European allies, and Chinese. So this visit also gives an opportunity to iron out some of the differences. And beyond that, of course, there is the trade between China and France. There is a trade about $68 billion. China is the seventh largest trading partner of France. So they have also gone on to take the trade relation forward, and number of agreements have been signed to that extent. So, Asuma, what I can say is that this is President Macron's attempt to influence China, so that in China can influence in turn Russia, especially President Putin, that they should make an earnest effort to end the war. At the same time, as I said, that America and European Union, including France, are not on same page because they are skeptical about the whole proposal, that is 28-point proposal that have been mooted, and they have serious reservations, especially when it entails Ukraine losing territory, when it entails Ukraine's sovereignty being questioned, and also why or how Russia can influence the internal dynamics of Ukraine, whether they have to have elections or re-elections. All that is not where the Europe and France are not on the same page. So I think, in a nutshell, President Macron has made this visit, important visit, primarily to get the Chinese also to see the perspectives and see how they can influence President Putin to end the war, at least scale down and go in for some kind of ceasefire. Asuma.
Yes, and Major General, as you rightfully mentioned and also highlighted, that this is the fourth visit, and again, France this time went on its own, which is different from Macron's previous visits, where he was always accompanied by either German chancellors or EU President von der Leyen. So, why do you think, what was high in their agenda for France in particular during this visit?
Well, firstly, this is more on the bilateral, dimension, because it is one-on-one how President Xi and President Macron can strike a one-on-one chord. And second point is to clear some of the misunderstandings that are there between the two countries, especially how Europe sees China, how France sees China, how Germany sees China. They have a different perspectives. So this is basically to clear the air and to put the French perspective directly to President Xi Jinping. And I have spent some good deal of time in China as a defense attaché. Now here, even President Xi has gone out of the way, because the Chinese leadership do not go beyond Beijing to entertain these state visitors. Here, President Xi has gone all the way to Chengdu, and that is a very exceptional, protocol that he has followed. So this shows that even President Xi is very keen to develop close ties with France and remove some of the irritants that are there between the two countries. So basically, I think this is a very bilateral visit where the two leaders want to clear the air, want to ensure that the irritants are removed, and take the bilateral relationship to the next level, especially when it comes to the trade relations, and also sort out certain degree of geopolitical differences that are there. Because today, frankly speaking, the globe is in real, I would say, in the free fall. And what President Trump is trying to do, G2 with President Xi, Europe not on the same page. So all this, I think, today nations are also dealing bilaterally, and this is a bilateral visit primarily, which gives opportunity to President Macron to directly deal with Xi and iron out any difference or misunderstandings and take the relationship to the next level, Asuma.
Yes. Thank you very much for laying it out there, Major General Gigi Dwivedi. Always a pleasure learning from you. Thank you very much. Now we move on the focus to UK. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer has stated that Russian President Vladimir Putin is responsible for the 2018 Novichok attack in Salisbury, UK, citing a recent public inquiry. The inquiry concluded that the poisoning of former Russian double agent Sergei Skripal by GRU operatives was ordered by President Putin, resulting in the death of innocent bystander Dawn Sturgis. In response, the UK has imposed new sanctions on Russia, including targeting the GRU military intelligence agency. Let's listen into what Keir Starmer has shared.
Lies with Putin, and it's further evidence of the shocking and reckless hostile activity on UK soil. And so it's very important that we put in the most stringent sanctions on the GRU for the first time, but it also reinforces why we need to remain vigilant to the ever-present threat that is there from Putin and from Russia. And this is hostile activity on our soil. We have to be in a position to respond to that. We have responded with sanctions. First time we've done sanctions like this at this scale on the GRU. Right thing to do, and we'll remain ever vigilant.
However, Russia has denied involvement in the attack and dismissed the sanctions, with Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova warning of potential retaliatory measures. Now for this discussion, we welcome Mr. Shyam Batra. He's a former mayor candidate for London, joins us live from London. Thank you very much, Mr. Batra, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now looking at this, how might this UK's new sanctions, how does this affect already strained UK-Russia relations, and why is UK coming out with such reports now? Could this timing jeopardize the ceasefire talks that's ongoing?
Thank you very much for having me again on NewsX. I'm Shyam Batra, as you said.
Thank you.
I tend to disagree with what the decision has been made. It's been made after 7 years. It could have been dealt with during COVID time or whatever the case may be. But to insinuate that a president of a country would kill 2 people in our country by an order given for Sergei Skripal and his daughter. But the attempt went horribly wrong. Instead of just them, a British mother, Dawn Sturgis, died after coming into contact with the nerve agent. This could have been planted by anybody, anywhere, at any time. I don't understand how the British courts have found it that Mr. Putin is wholly responsible. Is it because he's entangled with the war with Ukraine and it's another excuse to halt the war, or to commence proceedings with the war to come to some kind of peace arrangement? There doesn't seem to be a peace arrangement happening because Putin is never in the picture. And Zelensky and his crew, the whole of the European Union, are involved. It's like too many chefs in the kitchen. There should have been a proper dialogue created between Putin and also Zelensky in a table, in a room somewhere, either with Trump or not. But this, I think, is really a sideshow. After several years, they've now come up to the conclusion that Putin is wholly responsible. Where is the evidence and where is the proof? I'm not standing for either side,
Yes.
but the point is I'm standing for the general public of our country. We are yet again embroiled into something that we have no real knowledge of, and I don't think our new Prime Minister has any inkling of what really did happen at that time. This is very serious political stuff. And then to go ahead and sanction when they've already got hold on their money and the war hasn't even concluded. No money should even be touched, let alone anything else, during a war. It doesn't work like this. This is a current war going on. And both parties are not coming to the table because there is far too much interference. This episode is another sideshow for us not to stop the war, but to continue it.
Thank you for sharing your perspective. And Mr. Batra, how could this Russia's denial and warnings of retaliation, what could come out when they say warning of retaliation? And how do you think this is going to be influencing broader European and global security dynamics towards Europe?
Well, I mean, it's a great question you just answered. The thing is this, that the Europeans have entangled themselves into this war. This war is between Russia and Ukraine. It has always been like that. The Novikov incident, as a result, I mean, as a result, the UK government has sanctioned the Russian military intelligence agency. And if they were responsible, I think they would have put their hands up. At the end of the day, they didn't kill millions of people or suspected to kill anyone for that matter. We need to see fresh evidence, fresh proof that this really happened and it was them who did it. How can you prove such a thing sitting in a pub and catching this chemical weapon? It could have been anywhere. Anyone could have planted it. My point is that this, I think, is another sideshow to conclude the war. Whilst Russia is proceeding with their troops to capture other regions of Ukraine, there must be sensible, sane dialogue. I have said many times, and I hope that you can translate this to our English government, that I'm happy to help in negotiating this war. I don't think anybody, as the US government has any tangle on opening this war and closing it. It hasn't been closed. And if we continue after Christmas, God knows what's going to happen. I believe this is a complete sideshow. I don't know why it's come up after several years. They've had so much time to find evidence. Where is the evidence?
Yes. With that, I would like to thank Mr. Shram Batra for joining us today all the way from London and sharing that insight. Thank you very much. Now we move on to Germany. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz's ability to control his unruly coalition faces another test. When Parliament votes today on pensions bill that has stirred a revolt by young members of his own Conservative Party. Merz fears the revolt could sink the bill and threaten the coalition's future and have eased after the left party signaled it would abstain. However, the clash has renewed questions over Merz's control of his party and could force him to rely on opposition support to push the package through Parliament. Merz's broad coalition of conservatives and the centre-left Social Democrats has a slender majority of 12 votes in the parliament, enough theoretically to pass this legislation, which maintains current pension levels. And that's a wrap on the NewsX Eurozone. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.